Hi everyone. Today I wanted to talk about a movie from 1953. This is The Earrings of Madame Du, directed by Max Ophuls. A film that in the 2020 poll, Sight and Sound BFI poll, ranked 93rd and last in the critics poll, which was kind of sad because I love this film. But even more remarkable was 546th in the director's poll of this same BFI Sight and Sound poll, which will be revived for 2022 as they do this survey of critics, survey of directors to form a consensus. The director one really puzzles me because, if anything, Max Ophuls is one of the greatest film stylists of all time, and he has been much remarked by other directors as an influence. Paul Thomas Anderson is on this Criterion release, and in the supplements, it's credited as an introduction by Paul Thomas Anderson. I don't know, it's more or less sort of a visual essay in which he kind of babbles on rather unconvincingly. A strange and curious addition in the supplements. But I think the director that Max Ophuls is often associated the most with is Stanley Kubrick. And this is because Kubrick has stated many times that Max Ophuls was a big influence on his career. And certainly you see it in the long takes and the moving camera. And both Kubrick and Ophuls could be discredited or criticized for a rather cold and distant style, that it was not part of the mainstream of classic storytelling, in which there was not a lot of edits, and storytelling that kind of depends on editing to keep the audience in tune with what the story is meant, the emotions in the story, what those emotions are meant to be, which emotions are meant to be conveyed. I think also with both Kubrick and Ophuls, you have a kind of lack of psychology in the commentary here that's included on The Earrings of Madame Du. They describe it as kind of an anti-psychology. What makes Jack Torrance tick? With Kubrick, it's generally speaking his stories are kind of revolve around the malfunctioning of the male ego. With Ophuls, it's more a malfunctioning of our emotions, our imagination, and that we are prisoners of our imagination and hence our emotions. And with Ophuls, love itself, which is his great subject, is seen as a kind of illness. And some of this comes from the French writer and novelist Stendhal, who Ophuls really does. I've read a couple Stendhal novels, and certainly I don't think Ophuls ever adapted a Stendhal story. But again, in the supplements here a couple times, and in the supplements on Letter from an Unknown Woman, Stendhal is quoted, and this idea that love is sort of an infection that comes upon us from the outside. We have no control over it. It's here, it comes. Without our active participation, we have to deal with it. So although Stendhal is quoted as love as being an illness, there's also a quote used in the supplements here that passion/love is also our reason for being. It's what makes us human. It elevates us. But with Ophuls, of course, there's the danger that can ensue from these passions. In Madame Du, we have a wealthy general who has this beautiful and elegant wife who's flirtatious. She's the object of envy of all the other women in their social set, their very high-class social set. And she has many flirtations with men. The general he jokes about it, all her suitors. But then she makes the mistake of falling in love, in a real passionate love, with an Italian diplomat. These three characters are played by Charles Boyer as the general. Vittoria De Sica as the Italian general, and the wife played by Danielle Dargo, who gives, I think, one of the greatest performances in movie history. I think she's absolutely incredible in this movie. And what the general is the way the general views this marriage is a kind of camaraderie. He knows there's no passionate love there. There's no children, although it's not specified. So, and he enjoys the fact that he has this beautiful wife as a kind of possession. Yet he's genuinely, he genuinely has affection for her. But in some sense, they're going through the rituals of their of both marriage and society, what's expected, and you're granted some latitude of freedom, but you never have to stray too far. This is a rather superficial existence, and real love, real passion, that would be an intrusion, an unwelcome intrusion that has to be dissolved. And Ophuls also is a great proponent of fate and coincidence, and there's three great coincidences in this, in Madame Du, where the diplomat and the wife meet going through customs, bump into each other, immediate attraction. A couple weeks later, they're traveling in their carriage. This is set in Paris around 1900. They're traveling in their carriages, collide, and again they meet, but he doesn't get her name, and Madame Du's last name is never used in the film. And then they're at a fancy ball. They're sitting down for dinner, and because everybody wants to see how this fantastic-looking, suave diplomat will get on with the belle of their social set, they're placed together. So. And now we have the plot set in motion, and motion is the word. This is, in all of Ophuls' films, movement is supreme, and the camera moves, the people move. You might say that Ophuls' style is experimental in this way. Nobody else, others, directors like Kubrick might do long takes and moving cameras. But for Ophuls, it's like the ultimate form. The construction of the film, where each movement, each camera movement leads to the next. Certainly we do have some inserts where the camera is static, but for very short periods of time, and then we're on the move again. As we watch these characters move inexorably to their destiny. And Ophuls uses, as he often does, he uses inanimate objects. They become not just part of the plot, but they become like symbols, and they become like characters. And certainly the earrings of Madame Du become a character in this film. They are heart-shaped, and they're in the beginning of the film. We see Madame Du as she goes. She owes a lot of money. And she has spent way past her allowance, and she doesn't want to go to her husband to pay off her debts. So she goes through all her possessions, which are humongous, her furs and all her jewels, and she lights on these heart-shaped earrings, and they are presents from her husband on their wedding day, which indicates nomadic that the meaninglessness, her willingness to, at least her willingness to impart, says a whole lot about their marriage. And so these earrings in the beginning of the film, they are meant to pay off a financial debt, but then they become an erotic object. They keep turning up. So they become an erotic object, a kind of symbol of her love for this Italian diplomat. Then they become almost like a sacred object, and by the end of the film, they're actually offered. They become an offering to the gods. So, in this film, or in this Criterion package, we get one of their great booklets. This is a special edition release from Criterion, and it has a Molly Haskell essay in it. as always, she's absolutely wonderful. This is one of her favorite. I think she one time said it's her all-time favorite film. Of course, we get a lot of really good pictures in this booklet. Her essay is just outstanding. I wish she had written a book on Ophuls, because I think Molly Haskell's interpretation of his films are the best I've ever read. Also in this in the booklet, we get Dressing Madame Du, and this is a really good part of a memoir by an art director who worked with Ophuls several times, and it's a memoir of their relationship, their friendship. Ophuls was a very funny, a very funny individual, and it's a really good portrait of Ophuls. And on the disc itself, we get some interviews with other collaborators, including the director Alan Jessewa, who was very young, early 20s, when he worked as an intern on The Earrings of Madame D, uncredited, but Ophuls noticed him and made him like a third assistant director on Ophuls' last film, Lola Montez, and they became fast friends, even though Ophuls died about a year after the release of Lola Montez. And you know, and there's some other collaborators there as well, and the reverence with which everybody viewed Ophuls. He could be very he had a certain idea in mind of what this movie was going to be about. He was very definite. He rarely, although he sometimes compromised when the technical problems were too much to overcome, but everybody wanted to work with him because he was just so single-minded in his approach to storytelling, and nobody else was doing things like this, and really nobody much since has been doing so. It was something very unique and extraordinary for his collaborators, and he worked with great collaborators, and all great directors, you know, they're not working with the second stringers, they work with the A-team. Then we get an audio commentary, and this is with Galen Schudler and Susan White, and this is a really good commentary. I mean, two women are much better than when you have two men. They're always, you know, in competition. Who's going to dominate the commentary? These two women, they really get along together. Even when they disagree, they do add a lot of feminist ideology to the story. And to the movie, and also Freudian ideology to the movie. I'm not sure how much of that Max Ophuls intended, but nevertheless, it certainly reflects an academic approach to movies from, you know, that started occurring, I guess, in the 70s and 80s. But it's nevertheless a really interesting commentary. We get a visual essay from Tag Gallagher in which he kind of deconstructs different scenes from the movie, and deconstructing Ophuls' style and the meaning of all these camera movements, because they're so precise. Every time I watch the film, I've probably seen it 2 or 3 times in the movies and several times on video. Every time I watch it, I see something different in the camera movements and how clever and how expressive so much of them were. And also in the booklet, and why it's so long, is we get it's called a novel, but it's really not a novel. It's by Louise de Villemorin, and there's a really good supplement on the release where there's an interview with her, and she just absolutely says, "This was terrible. This was such a terrible adaptation of my movie," and it's really funny, you know, because I'm not sure de Villemorin was a very much a best-selling novelist, but she was. I don't know how she's remembered in France, but she must have been published in the U.S. because there is a translation of this novel in the booklet. And as we see a picture of Danielle Deriot and Vittoria De Sica. And it runs maybe about 40 pages. It took me about an hour to read, so it's really more or less a novella or a long short story. And I was surprised it's really good. It's not, Letter from an Unknown Woman used Stefan Zweig's similarly length short story, but it's not as good as that, but it's pretty good, and the movie actually is pretty close to it, to the events in the story, but very much so the ending has changed, and of course the screenwriters and Ophuls worked very closely with the screenwriters on his movies. It's a brilliant adaptation, just like Letter from an Unknown Woman. It's just brilliantly constructed. Form has meaning. The screenplay is just, it so plays into the style, the visual style of Max Ophuls, and so it's an improvement, I think, on the novel, but the story. But the story is pretty much worth reading. It's in and of itself, and certainly from the standpoint of how great filmmakers take the elements of a novel or a story that really that they appreciate it and give it some kind of visual form. Okay, so this little mini series on Max Ophuls will conclude with my next video, which is going to be on Lolo Montez. That's going to be a tough one to talk about. This was pretty easy. I love this movie, and I think it's a great film. It certainly doesn't deserve to be 93rd in the 2022 poll, but Max Ophuls' reputation, for some reason, is in real decline, and it might not even make at least the critics list. It might not even make it anymore. Lolo Montez was his giant failure that pretty much killed him. He had a bad heart, and it was so hard for him to recover from his disappointment over Lolo Montez. But it's a gorgeous film. I can't wait to give it a crack. Like I say, it's a tough one. There's only one other Blu-ray available, and that's an Olive release of Caught, one of his American films. And that was on the Criterion Channel a few months ago, and I did do a discussion of Caught, which is a really good movie too. But I recently read that Kino Lorber is releasing one of Max Ophuls' European films, an early one. I think it was made in, I didn't write down the name, Little Heiresses or something like that in the English title at least. And that, I think, comes out in January, so I'll be eager to get to that. I have never seen any of Max Ophuls' European films, and they're very, they're very obscure, hard to come by, at least in the United States. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen to me this far. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully I said something interesting along the way. Comments would be welcome. You guys take care.